The Little Johnny Chronicles number 23, the Darkness series, episode 4, the 7 Deadly Sins, the Gateway of Moral Violations. So we began the series by talking about the trolls. In our hierarchy of darkness, the trolls reside at the bottom. And the trolls are a subtle gateway to darkness. And what I mean by that is, it's kind of the beginning of our own self-erosion of our dignity, our moral compass, our ability to treat others right, even when we desire to do something different. It's discipline, I think, plain and simple, but it's also a sign of our character when we desire to act out in a malevolent way or a devious way, and just make people's life hard by being an asshole. That's really all the trolls are doing, are being fucksticks. And what I call it is a subtle gateway to these violations, to this behavior, because it always leads to something worse. If you insult somebody, if you hurt somebody, if that's your modus operandi, if that's your habit, you're probably going to do worse things with your life. I don't think it's different than that. It simply becomes the gateway to worse behavior. The second role or topic or subject on the list of or the hierarchy of darkness is the addict. The addict isn't necessarily a bad person. There are people that make mistakes and get hooked on a thing, whether it be drugs, alcohol, food, you name it. But it's the first hard gateway. So, the trolls being a subtle gateway or a soft gateway, where it's just talking shit, being a butthole. There's no crime against being an asshole. The addict transcends that. And they're not necessarily a troll either, but once you become addicted, it could lead to much, much worse behavior, and it typically does. We talk about alcohol, we could talk about violence, domestic violence, assaults, drunk driving, even murder. People who kill their friend, in a drunken rage or in a brawl. Sometimes it just happens by accident. You can see where escalation doesn't take very long at all when you're under some sort of substance. And, not to mention all the other types of criminality that's associated with being an addict. Stealing to get your fix, or sacrificing your body to get a fix, which could be illegal, right? Prostitution is illegal. You can start that downward spiral really, really quick once you become an addict and you start to enter the world of criminality, which is what we should try to avoid at all costs. Third up on the list of the hierarchy of darkness is the opportunist. Sometimes an opportunity presents itself and we can't help it. We see this shiny object and we can't help but to steal it or to take it, or we see a situation where we can gain some pleasure and maybe get away with it. The example I always use is the drunk out, passed out person who has had too much to consume, and they're vulnerable. There's nothing they can do to protect themselves. Our responsibility there is to get them to safety, but often, and we hear about it all the time, somebody takes advantage of that drunk person, or if they're drugged out, it doesn't matter, and they have their way with them. They violate them sexually, and that's a crime, right? It's you're not supposed to do that. And so the opportunist simply doesn't take any risks for accomplishing whatever they do. However, they're still breaking the law. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about crime, true crime, hard crime. And the opportunist, what I call the opportunist, or the thing that lures the opportunist, is winking. The winking temptation, the winking of temptation, and it gets our attention. And do we walk away or do we participate? It's hard, walking by that garage and you see that thing you've coveted your whole life. and it's there and it's free. It's for the taking. There's no cameras, there's no neighbors. It's the middle of the day. Everybody's at work, and there's a perfect opportunity for you to steal that thing and have it for yourself. You're not supposed to do that, right? We're supposed to operate with integrity, for ourselves, first and foremost. But of course, that integrity benefits society, right? In the form of not stealing shit when we're not supposed to, doing the right thing when nobody's looking. That integrity is important. So you got the trolls, the addict, and the opportunist. And the next layer to that are the 7 deadly sins. So from the subtle gateways to a first hard gateway in the addict, to winking temptation, that simply acts as a lure to cross a boundary into criminality. You have the 7 deadly sins, which are a gateway to it's a gateway of moral violations that leads to worse behavior. Once we start to violate our morals and sacrifice our integrity and compromise our moral values and our virtues, it's easy, and I think it's only the natural progression to lead into criminality, to criminal activity. So the 7 deadly sins, I call it self-enslavement. Because once you start going down that rabbit hole and start to commit crime, and participate in simply egregious behavior that has no moral code or standard, it makes it easy to do almost anything else from there, whether it be stealing or burglarizing or murdering or sexual types of assault. There is so many different types of crime. I mean, I can't even start to list it all, but you have organized crime, you have gangs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can keep going down that rabbit hole, but it starts there, right? It starts with our trolling behavior, just subtly being a dick and not giving a shit about others' feelings or what they need or what they want in life, and we just stick the knife in them verbally. From there, we could go anywhere, right? It probably leads more directly to the 7 deadly sins, but the reason I mentioned the addict and the opportunist is because they're not criminals per se, but again, it presents gateways to criminality. And the 7 deadly sins, I think, crosses all those boundaries and leads directly to criminality. I had wanted to speak about the 7 deadly sins ad nauseum and kind of give some examples. There's animals associated with each one. There are demons associated with each sin. But that turned into a shit show. I tried to do it a couple of times and it just ended up being garbage. So what I'll do is I'll just mention them, give a brief definition, maybe give an example of crime that can be committed in that realm, and then move on with our day. So the first deadly sin is lust, and these are in order from most least severe to most severe, because that's how a lot of the research I did, almost all of them said that there's a tiering system, and that there are some that are worse than others, and also that there are particular groupings, right? So the first 3, lust, gluttony, and greed, are related to our animal cells. And if you think about it for half a second, it makes sense. Lust, right? The desire for sex. It's driven by our nature, our desire to reproduce. And so in that way, it does make sense that it's a kind of an animal instinct. However, because we're a higher thinking being, a conscious being, we have a different mandate. We have a higher level of responsibility to behave in a way that is conducive to the functioning of society, because there are other people to consider. There are laws to consider. There's justice to consider. We're animals. They have their nature, and that's it. It's kind of cut and dry for them. Lust is an intense longing, or unbridled sexual desire. It can also involve food, fame, power, or sex, right? Lust for power, lust for fame, things like that. And it causes us to act out of sorts, right? For, the average individual who participates in lustful behavior, it could lead to unrestricted sex, which is not illegal, but that could lead to other things, right? Using sex to trade for things like money, prostitution, or objects or things, right? People use their bodies in different ways to get what they want. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that per se, uh, but nonetheless, you do have to compromise your dignity to a degree in order to operate that way. And that's a slippery slope. Once you do that, you go from there. Now you're talking about pimps and potentially human trafficking, etc. And we could all see the criminality in that. Not to mention sexual assault, rape, and worse types of crimes related to lust, like incest. Especially when it comes to pedophilia, like those sick motherfuckers. Simply just not only commit a crime, but they destroy people's lives in the process. And so, lust in and of itself maybe isn't necessarily a horrific type of sin, but it can escalate to just a level of depravity that is distasteful to almost all of us. Not obviously the perpetrators don't have a problem with it, but to the rest of us, it definitely is a problem. We have to protect our kids, and we have to protect the innocent from these types of perpetrators. But anyway, I belabor the point. So that's lust. Next on the list is gluttony, the overconsumption to the point of waste. And even just the overconsumption, your body only needs so much food. You could say gluttony applies to objects and other things too. Gluttony and greed can be kind of conflated, so let's keep it to the food. You want to eat what you need. It's okay to have the extra burger on occasion or those fries. But gluttony in and of itself is not a crime. And I don't necessarily think there are a lot of crimes that it leads to. But if you think about monopolies, right? You have a business that consumes all its competitors in the speaking about it in the context of competition and good business practice, and when in reality they want to monopolize the system so that they can hoard all the wealth, so they can eliminate the competition. So the initial phase would be the gluttonous portion, where they overconsume smaller companies, which leads to the next one, greed. For the sole purpose of that is greed, right? The excessive desire for wealth or material possessions, often at the expense of others. And in reality, if you look at everything that's going on in the world, it's not difficult to tease that out. If you look at the environment, let's just talk about the environment. You have pollution in the air that's already been demonstrated to cause respiratory illness, not just illness, but disease. It's leading directly to disease like cancer, etc. The same thing with our oceans. You talk about pollution, whether it be petroleum products, or I think plastics included. Plastic is a petroleum product. So you talk about the microplastics that can have contaminated the fish. They're in virtually every fish sample that they found recently. The same thing with umbilical cords and placentas. Virtually every single one of them that's been tested had microplastics in it. Not to mention, the tissue testing that's been done on live people, specifically, men's genitalia. They found microplastics in men's penises. And I know that that's a weird thing to say, but that's just an example of how egregious this thing is, how far this has gone, where the degradation of plastics leads to just simply smaller plastic particles. It doesn't go away. They talk about biodegradable when it takes 1,000 years. Well, we ain't gonna be around in 1,000 years. We might live 70 years. And so we've been consuming plastics for decades. However, it hasn't taken very long for those microplastics to start to appear. So we can imagine in 100 years what it's going to be like, because we only continue to increase our plastic consumption, all under the guise that it can all be recycled. Of course, which we know only about 5% of gets recycled in reality. So it's all based on greed. The recycling programs themselves are driven by the petroleum companies, the plastic manufacturers. Uh, it's smoke and mirrors. There's no such thing as the ability to recycle plastic or biodegradable plastic. It's a it's a play on words, and it's all designed to pull the wool over our eyes. Why? So they can make more money. It's not more complicated. That's greed. Um, what other sectors can we look at? We could look at the pharmaceuticals. Uh, Greed has killed people in mass when you talk about the opioid crisis. They continue to push the drug. The company that developed the opioids, Purdue Pharma, knowing that it was addictive in their own research, and then they increase the dosages. They increase the power in the pill, and it only made it more addictive and created this huge catastrophe that we have in our country now. I put it squarely on their shoulders, and of course, it's augmented by the cartels, whose motivation is also greed. Because once the opioid crisis took hold, they started to try to regulate the pills, and now you can't get pills. What do people move to? Heroin. Why? Because it's almost the same fucking thing as an opioid. Uh, Basically, one molecule of difference. There is no difference. It's fucking bullshit. It's all addictive nonsense that's hurting our people. And, never mind fentanyl, which is even a worse calamity and catastrophe for our society. You could just look at the homeless. You think there's no crime going on in a homeless camp besides drug dealing? Good luck. Uh, it's lawlessness. You have open drug markets. Go downtown and you smell it before you see it. It's not cool. And so we see how greed is definitely impacting our society, and how criminality is a huge driver, or greed is a huge driver for criminality. I don't know if I could say it backwards. Um, I'll try next time, but it's horrific. Um, and we'll move on. The next sin is sloth, right? Sloth, physical laziness, spiritual laziness, especially. It has also been defined as a failure to do the things one should do. Um, I don't think there's such a thing as an innocent bystander when it comes to observing a crime. I understand maybe if somebody has a gun or a knife, or if there's a level of violence going on, and you probably can't contend with it. Of course, the right answer is to call the authorities. Um, but there are a lot of opportunities to intervene. When you see somebody put that thing in their pocket in the store when they're not supposed to put it in their pocket. I know in California here, it's authorized legally. They could fucking steal. I mean, it's on the news all the time. So I don't understand that. But maybe that's sloth on behalf of our legislature, on behalf of our governor, on behalf of the government that runs the state. They don't want to deal with the crime in a proper way. Um, Not doing what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to protect the public. Businesses are leaving certain cities. I think Denny's has left Oakland because there's just too much crime. People will sit down and walk out without paying their bill. Um, who else? There was another company, In and Out, closed their first store in decades. Why? In Oakland. Why? Because crime. They just couldn't do it. It was dangerous. It was unsafe. And so we see our government's inability or lack of desire to fix the problem, sloth, not doing what they're supposed to do, um, leading to all this criminal behavior. It's not complicated. It's not different than that. I challenge you to do the homework. And then, if you want to have the discussion and call me wrong or an idiot, bring the evidence. Bring the evidence. Uh, the next one is wrath. Intense anger and hatred towards others, often leading to revengeful behavior, also known as rage. It may be described as uncontrolled feelings of hatred and anger. This one's not hard either, right? You kill my homie, I kill yours. Uh, you walk in and your spouse is having sex with somebody who is not you, the actual other spouse, and we can see quickly how things can escalate into violence. Um, People's thoughts are probably rational in some of those instances where you want to get back at the thing that hurt you, but of course, because we're a higher level being and a higher level thinker, we have a responsibility to tame that. And I understand that it's probably hard and challenging. We don't want our pride violated. But again, pride is at the top of the list of the 7 deadly sins. So is it another sin that's prompting you to take action? Yes, very much so. You're supposed to behave, which is shitty. Nobody wants to be taken advantage of, but there are right answers to things. There are right answers to solutions. There are correct reactions to situations. And very rarely, probably, do situations like that, the scorned lover, demand violence. I don't see very many places where that's called for, when your partner is voluntarily acting out or going off behind your back. All right, let's get to the 2 worst ones. The second on the top, toward the top of the list, is envy. It is like jealousy in that they both generate feelings of discontent towards someone's traits, status, abilities, or rewards. The difference is the envious also desire the entity and covet it. So not only do you look at the things that people have and maybe dislike it and you're a fucking hater, basically, but you also want that thing. And to take it a step further, you also take pleasure if that person loses that thing, whether they lose their job and lose their status, lose crash their car, they have a nice Corvette or a nice truck, and you simply can't afford it, and you're really happy that now they're missing out. Of course, maybe if they're gloating, fuck them, but that's typically not how it works. That's not how envy works, right? Somebody has a thing and you desire to have it for yourself, or you just wish that they didn't have it. It's fucking player status, hater status, on a different level. And it can definitely lead to crime, right? You got that thing, that person has that thing, and you're gonna steal it, or you're gonna do something to undermine their status and cause them to fall. And that's wicked. That's evil as hell. There's a million things to be said about that, but I don't think it's too hard to explain. If you don't get it, then read up on it. It's not good. And then the last one, pride. In almost every list, pride is considered the most serious of the sins and the source of the others. It is usually identified as believing that one is essentially better than others, failing to acknowledge the accomplishment of others, and excessive admiration of the personal self. In perhaps the best known example, many scriptures and Bible texts have identified that the reason behind Lucifer's damnation to hell was not his failure to acknowledge Adam due to his jealousy, envy, but because of his pride against God. And I don't know about all that Lucifer stuff. I mean, it's got to be true to some degree, right? If it's not a fact, it's a metaphor. But pride leads to all the other ones, etc. Right? Envy. You're a proud self, and what, you can't have that thing? Fuck that! I can't have it too. And now you're stealing it, or you're finding a different way to get it that violates your integrity and your moral character. You toss your moral compass in the trash or put it on pause so you can do a thing because you can't go without. That's just pride. And I won't get into why pride can lead to the others. I think if you put a little bit of thought into it, you can come to those conclusions for yourself. But again, these 7 deadly sins are a violation of our moral code that directly leads to criminality. Because once we start eroding the morals, the principles, the ethics that we live by, it makes it easier to go deeper down the rabbit hole of deviousness and the darkness that we're talking about here. Each one of these sins has a demon related to it. And if you read up on those demons, it kind of reminds me of, it actually reminds me of people. I had so many thoughts as I was reading up on it, and it reminded me a lot of government. I can't make that up. It was, anyway, it's tragic. And if you think about the seven deadly sins, and I say the word politicians, you can start to put two and two together really quick. If I say the words seven deadly sins and I say corporations, again, it's not hard to correlate all those things. We can say the same thing about other government officials like law enforcement. I have respect for law enforcement, but you get a bad apple and they do poison the whole bunch. It's not more complicated. You talk about three-letter agencies. You don't even have to use your imagination. Google it. Google crime or legitimize crime by these three-letter agencies. Now, they may be doing something that's technically legal, but when it comes to our ethics, our religions, our moral codes, it is absolutely asinine. It's absolutely derived from the seven deadly sins, a direct violation of those in order to do whatever the fuck they want. Military leaders, and I'm not talking about just the ones in this country. I mean, think about the globe, right? They're using their rank, their power, their position, the gun, literally, to subjugate the population in their country or their state or however that works. And again, that's not to lump everybody into that one pot, but I use those examples because it's prevalent. It's simply too widespread for it to be ignored. And it starts with them. Like, it starts with leadership, right? People always say, "Oh, this is the leader's responsibility if something goes wrong." Okay, let's not disagree. If you're a leader and you're in charge, and inflation is 1,000% in your country, think of Venezuela. If you're a leader and you're in charge, and there are literally Venezuelan gangs who are co-opting entire apartment complexes and collecting the rent on behalf of the owner that owns and cutting the owner out in reality of the apartment complex, which is happening right now in Colorado. I just read a story a few weeks ago and today about Venezuelan gangs in Aurora, Colorado, taking over entire apartment complexes and collecting the rent at gunpoint. And there's video, okay? So I can't say that it's some fucking political ploy to marginalize the immigrants, illegal immigrants. But so you can't argue, it's there. And so when you have a government who won't manage the border properly, just like we manage our houses properly, we don't let strangers in, and if we do, it's not without permission, you get those problems. And it's sloth, basically, on behalf of our legislature, that they don't fix the problem, because the problem's persisted for the last 40 years. I think the last comprehensive immigration reform was performed by Ronald Reagan under his administration. It might have been a political ploy too. At a minimum, though, he got some shit done, and I can't argue against that. As opposed to now, where they're doing nothing. I mean, virtually doing nothing. And I know they're trying to fix it now, but it's election season, so of course they're gonna put on a show. So that concludes today's little presentation. We spoke about, the trolls at the bottom of the hierarchy of evil that I've developed, the addicts, the opportunists, and today we've discussed the seven deadly sins. That concludes and wraps up group 3, which is the lowest grouping I have in my hierarchy of darkness. We've completed that journey. These are all gateways to worse behavior. And if we're on the lookout for our trolling behavior and put a stop to it, if we understand our addictions and how they can lead to worse things, and learn to manage the things that we consume, whether it be food or drugs or alcohol or porn or whatever, if you can't control it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. And I'm not judging anybody. Like, I'm what they probably call a recovering alcoholic. I don't drink anymore, or at least I don't drink as much. But it could have always led to something worse. I always gave the example of, drunk driving. I got good at it, quote unquote, but there's no such thing as good at drunk driving, right? Anything can happen at any minute. We spoke about the opportunists. If you see something and you want it and it's not yours, you're not supposed to pick it up. It's not more complicated. If you see somebody in trouble and you're supposed to help, that's the bottom line. You're supposed to get people to safety. That's our responsibility as human beings, not to take advantage, not to violate somebody's person. Definitely not. And when it comes to the 7 deadly sins, is to understand where we fall in that. What are our habits? Does it lead to excess? Are we gluttonous in our consumption? Do we like money so much that we're going to withhold it and not provide our kids with all the things that they need so that we could buy shiny rims and a nice car when they need school clothes and shoes, etc. There are levels to that, though. You could talk about the corporations and all their misdeeds in that realm. So are you slothful? Are you not doing all the things you're supposed to do to take care of your family and raising your children? Are you letting them outside where the gangs are because you just don't want to deal with it? And maybe maybe that's not a crime in and of itself, but does it lead your children to criminality because that's who they're outside socializing with? The gangs and the drug dealers, and depending on where you live, right? But we all know how that works. Wrath, revenge. Are we fighting people all the time because we have a perceived slight? Do we not manage it properly? Do we not manage it maturely, right? Which we all claim to be adults, and of course I rarely see adults act like adults. It's sad right now. Not that I've never seen it, but right now it's simply not the case. Wrath. And then pride, right? Our pride always gets in the way, or I'm sorry, I skipped one. Envy. We become envious of people who are doing better than us. Life is hard. I'm not going to argue against that. I think we all have our challenges, and whether it be mental, emotional, financial, poor upbringing, we're born in the wrong place, right? If you're born in a country that doesn't support women and you're a woman, think of Afghanistan. You can understand your trajectory there a little bit, maybe. Envy. I don't know what else to say about that. I think that one's self-explanatory, but we continue to see it. So anyway, and then pride, which encapsulates all the other sins and leads to any of the other sins, is the worst of them all. If you want an example, the demon associated with pride is Lucifer, and of course that's the fallen angel. That's the king of hell. The king of darkness, the prince of darkness, whatever you want to call him. And we don't want to allow our prideful behavior to lead to criminality, to vengeful actions, to participate in envy because we want a thing, or because we look a certain way or walk a certain way, or we're part of a certain organization or work group, and we don't have the skill or a thing that we're willing to steal it or cut corners in order to attain that thing. Anyway, I could keep going for days, but we all understand how the 7 deadly sins work and how they work against us. I'm not saying there's no place for those things. I guess they exist for a reason, but they quickly lead down that rabbit hole of criminality. It's simply a matter of escalation. Once you start to dabble in the 7 deadly sins, once you start to dabble and simply taking things that don't belong to you because it's readily available and nobody's going to catch you, the opportunist, once we become addicted to our substances, we've already kind of violated our own moral code by not taking care of our health. And we need that thing, and we're willing to do anything to get it, and it doesn't matter if we got to go to work, it doesn't matter what time of the day it is, etc., etc. We start to compromise our values, and then we start to compromise in the law. And then our trolling behavior, which is really the beginning of the erosion of our moral self, of our dignity. of our healthy pride, right? Because there's such a thing as a healthy type of pride. You know, you could be proud in the fact that you do your best to behave well, to treat yourself well, by not being gluttonous, and to treat others well by not being greedy, by not being envious, by not being a fucking nuisance for no good reason. All those things. That rounds out group 3. We're gonna move on to group 2, and we're gonna talk about real criminals, hard crime. You've already moved well past these gateways, and you're fully in the trenches of criminality and darkness. But there's levels to that too, because it has to do with how many people you affect, the severity of the crime, right? If you take somebody's life, well, forget it. You're not in tier 2, and you're not in group 2 anymore. You're in group 1, and group 1 we're saving for last. Those are the ugly people. Those are the real horrific motherfuckers. You could an example there would be Hitler. If you want an example of what we're going to talk about in group 2, we get into gangs. We get into drug dealers, certain types, right? Because if we're talking drug dealers, a regular drug dealer, a street dealer, or maybe a low-level distributor might be on, depending on how much they distribute, might be on tier 2. But if you're a cartel, guaranteed you're in tier 1. That's darkness on a different scale. One I haven't figured out how to enumerate. We should probably give them weighted scores, but I'm not a scientist. I'm just a regular dude trying to present my point of view on the dark side of people because of my life experience. This doesn't come from reading books. It comes from watching and observing, but also maybe reading books to a degree, right? Accumulating knowledge, watching the news, staying informed of events, understanding history, our historic events. Again, Hitler, group 1, the worst of the worst. We're going to talk about serial killers, all that stuff, right? Again, the reason we're having this discussion is so we can identify the darkness in ourselves, make the changes, find ways to interface with ourselves in a better way, in order so we can present a healthy person to society, or a healthier person to society, so we can interface better with our brothers and sisters. And what prompted that is I just see how we're treating each other. Again, the perfect example is a comment section on a political post or a controversial post. Go in there. Nobody's having a discussion or a mature discussion. It's all fuck you, no fuck you back. And that's adolescent. That's the best we've got right now. In my experience, in my life, the highest maturity level you could probably ever achieve in a room with more than a handful of people is high school. I think that's it. I think an 18 to 19-year-old, that's the maturity level you get in the aggregate, the average of all those people in the room. You get 5, 6. Once you get above that number, the maturity level drops pretty quickly. In modern times, I would say post 2016. I don't know why that's. I don't know if that's a good marker, but that particular election in the United States kind of marked a crossroads for the way we treat each other, and it causes pride to look across the pond, meaning at the other countries across the world and the behavior of their citizens, and in a lot of places, not every place, but in a lot of places that behavior matches. Where our maturity level from 2016 to today in any given room used to be high school. It is now, in my opinion, junior high, because that's how you get. You don't get a nuanced conversation. You don't get a thought out conversation. You can't even make a correction to somebody that's wrong with evidence, pictures, diagrams, books, encyclopedias, and dictionaries, and they will still argue with you. That is ignorance at its worst. And that's where we're at. And so I think it's important to outline our evils, our misdeeds, even if they're not criminal, our moral standing with ourselves and in society. I'm not a Bible thumper, right? I'm not saying that people shouldn't be doing stuff. Like I said, I like to drink, or I used to like to drink. Okay, I like to drink, but I know I shouldn't, so I don't. Among other things, right? But I've identified those things in myself, and I have to open my eyes and understand who I'm hurting by behaving that way, and make the adjustments. It's not hard. It might be hard to identify our behavior, but it's not hard to change. When we're looking at the people who we're affecting and we're hurting. In my case, I was hurting the people that love me. I could have hurt people that I didn't know, right? In the form of a DUI and driving drunk and hitting somebody, or worse, killing somebody, or even worse yet, we've heard of entire families being sacrificed by a drunk driver simply because they didn't want to call the Uber or get a cab. I'll end it there. We'll begin tier or group 2 on this tier of darkness in the next episode. I don't know exactly what role or what character we're going to start with. I have it written down somewhere. I don't have my notes today. I tried to do this presentation today 3 different times yesterday, and each one was about an hour long, but I didn't do a great job. And I mean, I only did a mediocre job here, but it was better than yesterday. And so I'm going off the top of my head because I couldn't figure out how to get this one done. At any rate, have a good day. Work on yourself. Work on who you are. You stand to benefit. If you make this solely a selfish endeavor to identify the darkness and behave better for yourself, we all benefit. You become the first recipient of that benefit, but it doesn't just benefit you, and that's the beauty of it. You make an adjustment, and we all reap the rewards. Thank you.